Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I can hear it even before I open my eyes. The insistent drip of the bathroom faucet at the far end of our bedroom. Drip, 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 like a tiny hammer tapping the back of my skull. And in those small hours of the morning, I can smell something else in the stillness of this room. A stale blend of perfume, sweat, and anxiety, as though the air itself has conspired to hold on to every hushed secret. For a moment, I lie there, blinking at the ceiling. The blinds are drawn, but a weak glow from the street lamp filters in, casting ragged shapes across the walls and the crumpled sheets. Nothing feels right. I drag myself upright, my back protesting, and sit on the edge of the bed. A single bead of water breaks free in the bathroom and hits the sink. Then another. My wife, Emily, sleeps with her back to me, curled around a pillow on the far side of our king-size mattress. The space between us is wide enough to fit a whole different life. I watch her shoulders rise and fall with each breath, and I wonder, how long has this lie been sitting here with us, clinging to the walls, to the bed, to our clothes? It's not just the smell. Some combination of her new floral body lotion and the faint trace of a man's cologne that isn't mine, that sours the air. It's the tension, the unspoken betrayal. I catch myself shivering, though I'm not cold. There's a memory gnawing at me. The accident, that intersection, the jolt that nearly split my life in two. But right now, what echoes louder is a deeper crash, an emotional wreck that's been unfolding in slow motion. I rise, padding silently across the carpet to twist the faucet handle. The drip stops. For a second, the silence is suffocating. Then my mind starts racing again, replaying everything. I'm John Carter. I used to think being a good man, hardworking, steady, never one to raise my voice, would be enough. But I've learned that quiet men can carry storms inside them. You'd be surprised how loud a silent heartbreak can be when there's no one else around to hear it. I look back at Emily's sleeping form. Her hair fans out across the pillow, those soft golden strands that once felt like a gift in my hands. She's still beautiful in a way that can freeze me in place, but now I feel only hollowness. Inside, I'm a crumbling structure, walls collapsing, dust everywhere. We weren't always like this. There was a time she would swing an arm around my shoulders and call me my love, or my steady rock, or simply Jack, which felt oddly comforting. Somewhere along the way, those names faded. For months, maybe even a year, I became just hey or you. And I told myself it was just a passing phase, a slump in our marriage, maybe stress from her design projects, or from my job at the logistics firm. I accepted it. I always was good at accepting what life handed me. Then came the day at the intersection. We were driving back from a grocery run. She was scrolling through her phone, texting someone, I assumed. Traffic was light, the sun overhead, a usual Sunday calm. I hesitated too long at the stop sign. I guess, or maybe someone else ran a light from the cross street. It was a minor collision. A squeal of tires, a crunch of metal, a jolt so rough it set off the airbags. I remember blinking through the haze, my heart pounding, the smell of burnt rubber, and the chemical tang of the airbags filling my nostrils. Emily shrieked, "My dear, are you okay?" Her voice was frantic, trembling with concern, but that phrase hit me like a punch. My dear. She never called me that. Not once in our entire marriage. When I turned to look at her, dazed, I saw the color drain from her cheeks. For a split second, she looked at me like I was someone else entirely. Then she tried to cover it with a forced laugh, a quick scramble of words. Sorry. Oh God, I got confused. I said nothing. Just listened to the blood roar in my ears. The paramedics came, checked us out. We were both fine physically, aside from bruises and shock. But something inside me had cracked. We drove home after sorting out insurance details. She was quiet the whole way. I kept hearing those words in my head. my dear, my dear, my dear. In the days after, I started paying more attention, and that was how I discovered that her phone never left her side. How she'd slip away at odd hours to take a call or reply to a text. How she'd come back into the room wearing a bright flush across her cheeks. She rarely touched me anymore, but there was a faint glow in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. The bed felt colder, the living room more silent. My mind drifted back to a strange change in our pantry. Certain groceries, new brand of coffee, a jar of chili paste I never used, fancy imported cookies that tasted of ginger and orange. Things I never asked for and rarely saw her eat. On a hunch, I started rummaging. Some items disappeared almost as soon as they arrived. I asked her about it, casual-like, and she shrugged. Just trying out some new recipes, she'd say. But I never saw them on our table. One night, after she'd drifted to sleep, I opened her laptop. I'm not proud of it, but suspicion is a poison that seeps under locked doors. I found an exchange with a man named Mark Johnson. The messages were hidden under an innocuous folder labeled Client Contacts. But they weren't about interior design. They brimmed with flirtation and hints of stolen lunches. A wave of adrenaline smacked me in the chest. I should have confronted her immediately, maybe, demanded an explanation. Shouted, roared, slammed a door. But that's not who I am. My fury is quiet. So I closed the laptop, poured myself a whiskey, sat in the living room in the dark, and felt something inside me start to freeze over. That's when I began writing. A story. No, a confession. Or maybe it was a slow autopsy of our marriage. Chapter by chapter, I poured out the scenes of a wife feeding another man in secret. The phone calls. The hush of voices in the hallway. The stolen kisses, though I had to imagine those, because I'd never actually witnessed them. But I knew how they'd look. I put it all down on the page. Not just the facts, but the emotions I could hardly bear to voice. That silent rage that churned in my chest, the humiliation that crept up my spine, the desperate need to understand how we got here. Writing was my therapy. I did it at night, hunched over my desk under the weak lamp, feeling like a ghost in my own house. Emily would be asleep, or so I thought. Sometimes I'd hear her footsteps outside the door, but she never knocked. She never asked me what I was doing. Maybe she didn't want to know. Weeks turned into months. My manuscript grew, and so did my resentment. Then, one rainy afternoon, how fitting, she found the folder. I had left it on my desk, naive enough to think she'd never bother opening something with work documents scribbled across the front. She read every page, apparently. When I came home, she was seated on the couch, the pages scattered around her like dead leaves. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw fear. "Is this what you think?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You've known all this time." I didn't say yes or no. I just stared back until she broke the silence. "You don't understand," she began, but she stopped, like she realized there was no point. She didn't cry. She didn't deny. Instead, she just shook her head. And I remember thinking, she's not afraid that I caught her. She's afraid that I finally understand what it means. That our marriage, this life, our bond, it's all built on quicksand. She was terrified of what I might do, now that her illusions were undone. And I did do something, though not what she expected. I didn't slam the door or threaten her with divorce. I simply closed myself off. Like a vault door locking from the inside, I made it impossible for her to reach me. I took my time, mustering my heartbreak into something sharper, more cunning. I started placing seeds of doubt among our neighbors, our friends. I never lied outright. I asked small, loaded questions. To the neighbors who'd seen her leaving late at night, I'd murmur, "Did she mention where she was going?" To her friends, I'd casually say, "Emily's been anxious lately, thinking someone's following her, but I think it's the other way around." I watched as confusion knitted their brows. I left them with questions, not answers. Our suburban circle thrives on gossip. Soon, I heard the rumor swirl. Emily Carter says John's been stalking her. But maybe it's her who's stalking him. Something doesn't add up, they'd say. It was a peculiar shift of momentum, a chessboard turning mid-match. She'd grown accustomed to weaving a tale of marital dissatisfaction, probably painting me as the aloof husband who never gave her enough attention. Maybe she told them I was controlling, or that I'd threatened her. But now, with a few well-placed hints, the vantage changed. People saw her differently. Restless, edgy, always on her phone. She tried to do damage control, but the more she explained, the more tangled it got. That's when she confronted me in the living room. Eyes red, voice hushed with fury. "Why are you doing this?" she hissed, glancing around as though the shadows themselves might report back to the neighbors. I met her gaze, noticing how her cheeks flushed in that familiar way. But this time with anger, not desire. The tension was so thick that if I struck a match, I swear the whole room would burst into flame. She opened her mouth, but I cut in. "Go ahead. Lie again. Tell me it's all in my head, or that we can fix this." Her hands shook. She clenched them into fists, then relaxed, trying to keep her composure. I never meant to hurt you. I felt suffocated. You were always so distant. I needed what? My voice sounded dead to my own ears. Excitement. The thrill? Someone who calls you by a different pet name. She flinched. We stared at each other for a moment, two strangers in the wreckage of a home we built together. The overhead light flickered, or maybe it was my imagination. But the room felt darker as I spoke. Finally, she left without another word, retreating upstairs. I stood there a long time, feeling the corners of my mouth twitch in something that wasn't quite a smile. Days later, I found a note pinned to the fridge. She'd be staying at a friend's place for a while, or so she claimed. Truth be told, I knew she was probably with him. Mark Johnson, the high-flying attorney who radiated confidence and status. I'd read enough of her messages to piece together the real story. And that's how it went for the next month. We lived separate lives under the same official address, barely crossing paths except for a phone call about bills or mortgage payments. I heard from acquaintances that she was seen around town, sometimes alone, sometimes with a tall, dark-haired man. The details never surprised me. It was around this time that I decided to finish my manuscript. She'd already read a draft, but I wasn't done. The final chapters were waiting. My quiet revenge. I wrote them with a calm I didn't know I was capable of. By the time I typed the last sentence, I realized I felt nothing. Like I drained the last of my heart onto those pages. Soon after, I discovered a hotel receipt in her purse while she was briefly home to gather clothes. I had no shame left about snooping. The receipt was for a Tuesday night. 1 queen bed, 2 adults. Room service. Champagne, strawberries, chocolate. My stomach lurched, not from heartbreak, but from a cold recognition of the truth. I told her I knew. I gave her the receipt, watched her face, but her expression was blank. She didn't try to explain. She just stared at me, shoulders squared, chin slightly lifted, like she'd decided to end the charade. "We're done hiding it," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. I never wanted it to go this far." I didn't argue. I just gave her a tight nod. And that evening, once she was out of the house, I went to see a lawyer. I wanted to know my options. I wanted to see how the legal system would protect me, or at least keep me from losing everything. In that meeting, the weight of it all nearly buckled my knees. But I remained stoic, asking the necessary questions. The lawyer's office was cold, sterile. I barely noticed the tasteful decor or the framed degrees on the wall. All I heard was my own voice. So calm it scared me. 2 days later, it happened. The moment I'd known was coming but dreaded all the same. I walked in on them. Not by some elaborate plan. It was chance, or fate, or maybe the final cruelty of the universe. Emily told me she'd be out, so I assumed I had the house to myself. But I came home early from work, thanks to a canceled meeting, and saw an unfamiliar luxury sit-in in the driveway. My heart hammered as I crept inside. The house was too quiet. My mind jumped to the last few weeks, the near silences, the tension, the way she'd glance at her phone before slipping outside. Then I heard a low murmur from upstairs, voices, one huskier than the other. I climbed each step in what felt like slow motion. A part of me wanted to turn around, walk away, preserve some sliver of denial. But I kept going, drawn by a perverse need for confirmation. The bedroom door was half open. I saw them tangled in each other, half-dressed, bodies pressed close. The soft lamplight caressed their bare skin, highlighting the arch of her back. It wasn't a lewd scene so much as a painfully intimate one, her hand resting on his chest, his mouth brushing her neck, the heat between them practically shimmering in the air. My stomach twisted with revulsion, and a dark, twisted envy. I coughed, an involuntary sound from the shock. They startled, bolted upright. Emily pulled a sheet around her, eyes going wide. Mark, tall, broad-shouldered, hair slightly mussed, met my gaze with a mix of guilt and challenge, as though he was ready to defend his territory. We stared at each other in this bizarre tableau. No one spoke for several beats, until finally Emily said, "John," like it was both a plea and an apology, or maybe just a reflex. I took a step forward, letting the silence drag out. My voice, when I spoke, felt oddly distant. "It all makes sense now," I said, "all the calls, the late nights, the fancy groceries that disappeared." She bit her lip, glancing at Mark, who sat on the edge of the bed, obviously uncomfortable, but trying to remain composed. Emily must have realized how humiliating this was for me, but she also looked cornered, like she didn't know how to salvage the situation. Mark cleared his throat, as if steeling himself. "This was never meant to hurt you," he offered in a practiced, lawyerly tone. "Sometimes feelings." I cut him off with a raised hand. Don't pretend this is about feelings. I've seen your texts. You live for conquest." He bristled. I could see the flicker of anger in his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged so directly, but I also caught a glimpse of something else. Maybe pity, maybe regret. I didn't care which. I didn't lash out physically. I didn't even shout. I simply turned, my throat tight, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. I walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and out the front door. My body was trembling, the adrenaline surging like I was in mortal danger. But what I felt most was a cold emptiness. I drove aimlessly for an hour. When I finally parked near a deserted overlook by the water, I sat there, engine off, staring at the waves rolling in under a gray sky. The final shards of my marriage were cutting into me. I thought about the day Emily and I first met, how her laughter rang out when I spilled coffee on my tie, and she handed me a napkin with a warm smile. I remembered the small wedding ceremony, the vows we promised. All of that felt like a distant echo. A strangled sort of laugh escaped my chest. It was a sound I never heard myself make, half sob, half laugh. My mind flicked to the last page of my manuscript, those lines describing a husband who sees everything yet says nothing, who punishes with silence, who unravels his wife's facade until it collapses. That was me. But now it didn't feel triumphant. It felt like I'd lost the best part of myself in the process. By the time I returned home, Mark's car was gone, and Emily was in the living room, fully dressed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The overhead lights were off, and in the dimness, her silhouette looked more like a statue than a person. I stood in the doorway, not bothering to come any closer. She didn't move, didn't speak. It was as though a black curtain had fallen between us, and we no longer even recognized each other as husband and wife. "I'm sorry," she finally managed. "I never wanted you to see it like that." My lips twitched. "You're sorry I saw it, or you're sorry you did it." She exhaled shakily. Both. We stared at each other for what felt like a lifetime in a single breath. Then I spoke, my voice cracking like dried leaves. "We're done. Completely. Don't you think?" She nodded, slowly. I saw her eyes glisten with tears, but she blinked them back. "What happens now?" she asked, almost in a whisper. I swallowed the knot in my throat. "I want you out of here by tomorrow. I'll have the papers drawn up." A tiny flame of defiance sparked in her eyes. "It's still my house, too." I shrugged. "Fine. We'll let the lawyers figure it out. But I can't live like this anymore." She looked down, brushing invisible lint from her skirt. "Okay," she said. "I'll pack tonight." My gaze drifted to the hallway leading to my study. That's where my manuscript lay, a testament to everything I'd endured, everything I'd discovered about her, and about myself. It was a swirl of heartbreak, rage, and a strange thirst for retribution that I still wasn't sure how to quench. She stood up, walked toward the staircase, her head bowed. I expected some parting shot, an attempt to explain or rationalize. But she said nothing, and I was grateful for that. In that silent moment, the final thread of our relationship snapped. When she was gone, I flicked on a single lamp in the corner of the living room. Light pooled on the floor, throwing our furniture into harsh relief. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I'd saved for a different reason entirely, my lawyer's after-hours line. It rang twice before going to voicemail. My message was short, businesslike, as though we were discussing a real estate deal. Then I hung up and collapsed onto the couch, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes. My heart pounded. My breath came in shallow bursts. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was taking control, but I felt like I was stumbling through a dark tunnel, unsure which way was up. And somewhere in that haze, I recalled the day I first realized I was losing her. Her hand pulling away from mine, her eyes glazing over with a distance that had nothing to do with physical space. That was the real crash, the real intersection where everything changed. I barely slept that night. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. I remembered the shape of Mark's arm across her waist, the flush of her cheeks, the parted lips. I kept hearing her call me, "my dear," in the car crash, and it twisted into a cruel echo of her moans for him. By dawn, I was numb all over again. She was gone by the time the sun fully rose, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and an empty closet. I found a note on the kitchen table, but didn't bother reading it. I already knew it would be a painful mix of apology and justification. Instead, I stuffed it in a drawer and made coffee. In the weeks that followed, I did exactly what I'd planned. I filed for divorce. She contested, of course, claiming emotional distress, spinning her story about how I abandoned her emotionally. We hammered out terms, back and forth. Mark, as a lawyer himself, tried to intervene on her behalf. I half expected to see him at my own lawyer's office, smirking. But he kept his distance, probably wise, since his direct involvement could complicate matters. During all this, rumors ran wild. Our neighbors gawked at me with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Some tried to be comforting, baking pies, offering help, sending well-meaning texts. I accepted their kindnesses with a hollow smile, knowing they all wanted the inside scoop. I let them speculate. One evening, after wrapping up a meeting with my lawyer, I drove past Mark's office tower. I don't know why. Maybe a part of me wanted to see him, confront him. But I just circled the block, feeling the surge of adrenaline fade into emptiness. The thing is, when you lose what matters most, the old fears vanish. It's like you can't be hurt any deeper. So what's the point in fear? I caught a glimpse of him stepping out of the revolving doors, briefcase in hand. He paused to talk to someone. A client, perhaps, and a polite smile flickered across his lips. Confident, composed, he looked like the embodiment of success. And in that moment, I didn't feel rage or jealousy. I felt strangely sorry for him, because I realized that for all his trophies, his career, his expensive suits, the thrill of seducing another man's wife, he'd never understand the weight of genuine commitment. He'd never know what it was to share a life with someone through all the mundane details, the daily struggles, the unspoken hopes. I wondered if Emily ever told him how she liked her coffee on Sunday mornings, or that she was allergic to certain detergents. Probably not. I drove off, leaving him behind on that busy street corner. The legal process moved forward, slow and grinding. Emily and I still had to meet a few times, in mediations or to sign papers. Each time, it felt like stepping onto a battlefield. She wore her hair pulled back, lips set in a tense line, only speaking when necessary. We avoided eye contact. Then we'd step out of the conference room, and I'd pass her in the hallway without a word, each of us burying old memories deeper and deeper. Meanwhile, I finished rewriting the final chapters of my story, polishing them. For a while, I considered publishing it, some kind of exposé of our marriage's slow implosion. But I decided against it. That manuscript was for me, not for the world. It was the testament of a man who discovered that sometimes the quietest heartbreak can drive you to unearth truths you never wanted to see. Yet there was still a piece missing. The confrontation. A definitive moment of closure. It came one late afternoon, unexpectedly, when Emily texted me to say she needed to pick up a few more of her belongings from the house, stuff she'd left behind in the garage. "I'll come by at 5, she wrote. "I don't want to fight. Please." I was ready for her by 4:30. Dressed in old jeans and a t-shirt, I sat in the living room with the lamp off, letting the shadows lengthen. When her car pulled into the driveway, I stayed where I was. The front door opened, and she stepped inside, glancing around. "John," she called softly. I answered from my chair in the corner. "I'm here." She stepped into the living room, the setting sun slicing through the blinds in bright slivers across her face. I could see the tension in her posture. She clutched her purse like a shield. "I just need the last of my boxes," she said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded. "In the garage." "Go ahead." She lingered, as though searching for the right words. Then she blurted, "I never meant for this to happen. I swear I was just lonely. And Mark was there. It started so small, and then it spun out of control. I never wanted to destroy us." I looked at her, feeling the faintest tremor in my chest. "You did destroy us." She closed her eyes, letting out a long breath. "I know. You made a choice," I said quietly. "I guess we both did, in our ways." She shook her head, tears finally trailing down her cheeks. "I'm sorry." Silence. That painful kind of silence that is heavier than any argument. "You needed me to shout," I said eventually, my voice almost a whisper, "or do something to show you I still cared. But I never did. I trailed off, because even now, I couldn't quite articulate the emptiness that had taken root inside me long before her affair began. She glanced up, eyes shining. "John, it's too late. But maybe we can." "No," I said, gently but firmly. "Don't. It's done." She exhaled unsteadily, nodded. "Right." Without another word, she walked to the garage. I heard the scrape of boxes being moved, the soft thud of items placed in her trunk. Then she was back in the foyer, tears dried, face set in resignation. "I guess that's everything," she murmured. I stood, walking her to the door. My chest felt tight, but my voice was steady. "Yeah." She opened the door, paused on the threshold. Then she turned slightly, as if tempted to reach out and touch my arm. But she didn't. She walked out, closed the door behind her. I stood there, staring at the grain of the wood, listening as her footsteps faded down the porch steps. The engine of her car revved, and then she was gone. I closed my eyes, and in the next breath, it hit me, a rush of relief, of finality. That night, I opened a beer and wandered the empty rooms. Our wedding photos were still on some shelves. I took them down one by one, placed them in a cardboard box. I felt no urge to tear them up or burn them. They were memories, part of my story. I stacked them in the basement, out of sight, but not destroyed. As the months wore on, the legalities wrapped up. The house would be sold, the proceeds split. We agreed on a fair division of assets. Emily moved into a smaller apartment in town. Mark's place was rumored to be a high-rise condo, and maybe she stayed there sometimes. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. My colleagues at the logistics firm gave me the space I needed, though some offered condolences or half-hearted attempts at advice. I accepted them with a polite nod. Over time, the gossip died down. People found new scandals, new dramas. Life carried on. And me. I lived with a strange emptiness for a while. I woke up in the same bed that once smelled of her, but now there was only my pillow and the faint echo of the drip in the bathroom. I took care of my chores, handled the bills, sometimes ate dinner alone in front of the TV. I told myself I was okay, better than okay, in fact, free. But that sense of loss never fully vanished, at least not right away. I poured myself into writing. I wasn't sure I'd publish the story, but I found I couldn't stop. It was like picking at a scab, painful but compulsively necessary. I revised scenes, adding quiet details that only a betrayed husband would notice. The imprint of 2 sets of feet on a living room rug, the faint swirl of someone else's cologne in the hall. I let the pain bleed into the pages, hoping it would eventually leave me lighter. One evening, out of nowhere, I found myself driving back to that intersection where we had our little crash all those months ago. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows. I parked nearby and got out, standing on the sidewalk, hands in my pockets. Cars passed in sporadic bursts. It was just an ordinary intersection, like thousands of others. But in my mind, it was where I first glimpsed the truth, that she had a name for someone else, a tenderness I thought was mine alone. I stared at the stop sign, recalling how the airbags deployed, how my ears rang, how her panicked voice called me, "My dear," like she was talking to a phantom. That moment felt like an echo from another lifetime. I closed my eyes, inhaled the night air. And then I let it go. The next day, I woke up feeling, not happy, exactly, but lighter. Like I'd stepped out of a cage. The fear of being alone, the fear of never being good enough, it all dissolved. Because once you survive the worst betrayal, you realize there's not much left to be afraid of. I finished packing my manuscript, sealing it into a box. Maybe someday I'll revisit it, maybe I won't. But I don't need it anymore to understand who I am. In the end, I spoke to a realtor, prepared to sell the house. I told my boss I might transfer to a different branch, somewhere near the coast where I can watch the waves. It's not a grand rebirth. I'm not sure I believe in those, but it's something. It's forward movement. On my last evening in that place, I sat in the living room with the boxes piled around me, sipping a glass of bourbon. Everything looked so bare, walls stripped of art and photos. The drip of the faucet in the bathroom had started again, faint but persistent. It was as if the house was saying its final goodbye. I let my head fall back against the couch cushion, eyes half closed, and I said to no one in particular, in a voice that sounded far older than my years, "I'm not afraid anymore." The words felt like a benediction, a truth, because that's the final piece of this story. When you lose what you thought was your everything, you also lose the terror of losing it. It frees you in ways you never imagined. The fear disappears, and with it, she disappears too. So that's how I'll remember this chapter of my life. The slow drip in the bedroom, the faint scent of betrayal that lingers even after she's gone, but also the quiet, stubborn pulse of my own heart, still beating, still moving forward, becoming something else in the aftermath. She may have undone me, but I survived it, stronger, in a way that only a man who has walked through fire can truly understand. I'll walk away from this house, from these memories, with my head up. Bruised, yes. Broken, maybe, but still breathing. And in that fragile breath, there's a seed of resilience that no one can take from me. This is where my old self ends, and whoever I'll become begins. And as I lock the front door behind me for the last time, I can finally say, I'm not afraid. Not anymore.